Thank you very much, Terry. When you have a Cavan man giving a Monaghan man a nice introduction, you know integration has arrived. Good afternoon, Minister, ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues. I'm delighted to be with you here today to have this opportunity to share some of the work we do in County Monaghan. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that and Monaghan Migrant Support Centre. Before I do, I just want to give you a quick picture of the county. It has the fourth smallest population in Ireland. There are currently just over 63,000 people living in County Monaghan. 20 years ago, there were 53,000. And about 11-12% of our population is migrant. So without those people, our county would be losing population. And what goes along with that is loss of services and other opportunities. Our migrant population is made up of previous UNHCR refugee resettlement programme refugees. We have people in IPA direct provision centres. We have Ukrainians. We have a Roma community in the south of the county, and a lot of migrant workers from Eastern European countries and from other countries like Brazil and East Timor and Vietnam. Our local development company, we've been working with migrants in the migrant community for about 20 years. And this is our office in Monaghan. And within the county we have offices in Carrickmacross and Castleblaney as well. And we believe that local development companies like ours have the right combination of wraparound services and programmes to achieve a maximum impact when we're providing services to migrants. Services like our volunteer centre, the TOOS programme, the work in SICAP, the local area employment service. We're very flexible and adaptable and able to respond quickly whenever new situations arise. And we also have a very broad range of collaborative partners in the county, like the Education and Training Board, Monaghan County Council, TUSLA, and other partners beyond the county like the Irish Refugee Council, the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission. And also in the building next door to ours, the Young Women's Christian Association, they're one of our partners. They have a building next door to our office in Monaghan that has community space and office space to rent. It was also beside the library, and the buses stop at the door, and that's a major consideration in a rural area. Whenever people are being put out into rural areas, it's often the accommodation that's thought of first, put them in the accommodation, but when you're trying to support people in those areas, issues like transport become hugely important, and getting people into services or getting services out to the people. So transport's a major consideration for us, and that's why we started delivering Fáilte Isteach supports in this building in Monaghan town. Fáilte Isteach, basically it's English conversation classes supported by a pool of local volunteer tutors. The average attendance we would have in Monaghan across our Fáilte Isteach classes in the local town is about 227 participants per week. It varies up and down, but it's a real microcosm of how we integrate supports together. The SICAP team member coordinates the classes. Our volunteer centre sources volunteer tutors. Our TOOS programme sources support workers, because when you put on a Fáilte Isteach class, you need the room set up, the table set out, people registered, a cup of tea. We couldn't do it without those additional supports, and we collaborate then with our Education Training Board to make sure that the people we see in the conversation classes are referred to ESOL, or that people in ESOL have the chance to come to us to practice the language. But Fáilte Isteach is about more than just the language, because it unearths other problems. And when we started in Monaghan, one of the first things we realised was that mothers with preschool children couldn't attend the regular classes, so we started a little Cosmos group for mothers and toddlers, and then we bring them out on trips and things like that. We also started activities for women through our interaction with them within the community and within the classes. and also for migrant men. And the migrant men's group, again, the CE worker, we use 2 SAN CE. The CE worker that's with us currently took on a role to help the migrant men that we work with to get involved with volunteering. And the volunteer centre in Monaghan is now working with that worker to go to Carrick Cross in the south of the county to do stuff with migrant women, because we have a lot of people from the migrant community who wish to volunteer, but we don't have opportunities for them, so we have to build those opportunities ourselves using the support of the volunteer centre. We also found that language isn't just an issue for migrants. Whenever you're dealing with the community, there's a cultural divide that has to be bridged for migrants and state services and the local community. So we commenced a Cultural Champions project. It progressed to being a social enterprise called Link, and I'll not say much about it now except that we did a case study on it for SciCap in 2021, and it's available on our website. But it's a key support to bridge the gap between state services and our migrant community. We were dealing with our community, providing those services in this building in Monaghan Town, in an upstairs meeting space. But we had our TUS workers in a little office in the back of this building. We had our SciCap worker in our office next door, and the Link, they had a support worker as well. That person was up in the Monaghan County Childcare Committee office in a different part of town. So in 2022, we opened the Monaghan Migrant Support Centre. We brought everything into one office space at the front of the building, facing onto the street. And we put a notice in the door to say this is Monaghan Migrant Support Centre. If you go in there between 9:30, 12:30, Monday to Friday, you can get support, information, help with form filling, translation, signposting to other services, whatever it is you need. We had 2,000 visits in 2023, and we'll probably have more this year. But it's a connection point for us to our SciCap services, so we can progress people into education, training, driving lessons, self-employment where they're eligible. It's a contact point for our HSE intercultural health worker, and that helps people get interpretation when they go to dentists, to get medical card applications sorted and things like that. We put Link in there as well. They have a desk, and we also use it to give people orientation walks in our town. We're on the border. A lot of the time people come to the county and they don't realise that if they cross the county boundary and go into the neighbouring counties in Northern Ireland, they're in another country, they're in the UK, and they could get into all sorts of issues if they're there without permission. So we also, on those orientation walks that we give people in town, we show them where the library is, where the Garda station is, where other support services are, to make sure they understand where they're living in the county and in Monaghan. When people in IPAS are facilitated with a house, or when the County Council has housing pledged for beneficiaries of temporary protection, we support those people as well with translation, with help with translating with landlords, interpretation, understanding utility bills, and if they have a need for emergency support kits, they might be going into a house without a pot, a pan or a sheet for a bed. We provide kits where they're needed. Sometimes we get groups of people who need a specific support that we design for them. For example, we had a group of Ukrainian men who had limited English, and to give them employment opportunities on building sites, they were facilitated to do Safe Pass in Ukrainian and manual handling in Ukrainian. We look after people's mental health and well-being as best we can. When people are in centres, sometimes there's a need to get out of that space, to lift your head, and we support people to do things like well-being walks in local parks, yoga classes. We take them away sometimes for a day to the beach or a trip to the zoo if it's mothers or children. It's things that will help them basically free up their mind a little. And it's low-level trauma support. We also do a lot of hand-holding. There are people dealing with very traumatic issues in our community. We don't provide trauma support ourselves, but we will signpost people to it where it is needed. And from that centre then, we coordinate our visits to IPAS locations around the county. In 2022, we opened our office, as I say, the Monaghan Migrant Support Centre, and we went straight to the top and got the boss to come and do the job. We got Minister Humphreys to open our building. And this is a photograph of the great and the good on the day that we opened the centre. But I'd just like to point out some of the challenges we face here. So in the picture, this is Audrey, who was our SICAP worker at the time. It was Audrey's idea to bring everything together in the one office. And she was ably helped in this by 2 support workers. We start people with TUS, we progress them to CE as time goes on. It gives us an extra year or 2 with a worker before they leave us. And this is Fergal down front. Fergal was someone that we took on a temporary basis when there was an influx of refugees into South Monaghan, people into the asylum process. And we were very fortunate to have Fergal in situ when the Ukrainian situation arose, because he was brilliant support to us at that point in time. We were hoping to hang on to him, but we weren't able to. The funding ran out, so we lost Fergal. But local development companies are resilient. We talked to the HSE and we sourced Monta. Monta is Latvian and she is a community health worker with us, and Monta works along with her counterpart in the HSE to go out to the various centres and give healthcare supports. We also got the additional funding from the department, which we were very grateful for within SICAP, and we took on Zintra. And Zintra is actually a brilliant example of progression within a local development company, because Zintra is a migrant from Latvia who came to Ireland about 20 years ago. She volunteered with us on a Fáilte Jack programme in Monaghan. We took her on using the TUS work scheme as a support worker. We kept her on in CE as a coordinator, and when her time had expired, she progressed to work with the Migrant Rights Centre of Ireland on a project in County Monaghan. She ended up back in the private sector, but with the money becoming available for the additional supports for Ukrainians, we were able to take her back in, and she's really useful, experienced resource. However, we lost one of our CE workers. That's understandable. CE workers are in temporary space you can manage, but we also lost Audrey and Zintra. And the reason we lost them is the funding models that we work with sometimes are temporary, and sometimes programs go out for tender and people get nervous and they're looking for more security. And fortunately for us, Audrey went to work with the library service in Monaghan County Council on a project, and Zintra has gone to work with the local area integration team. And that means they're not a lost resource entirely to the work we are doing, because they're working at it from a different angle. We have to figure out our relationships with the LEI team, the local area integration teams, and we're really looking forward to doing that, because we're all working from the same hymn sheet trying to support people in the county. But just that funding structure, it throws up challenges, because even though we have replaced Audrey with a wonderful worker called Oksana from Ukraine, and Zintra has been replaced with a lady from Algeria called Leila, they're really great people, but there's a level of experience that we've lost with the other 2 people that Oksana and Leila will take a couple of years to gain. And that's something of a challenge when you're managing programs. Also, organisational culture can be a challenge. We're used to doing things in a certain way in local development companies. I've worked in local authorities. There's a culture, a way of doing things there, likewise in the private sector, and it's something that we have to figure out and work our way around. Monaghan Migrant Support Centre, what we've tried to do from our work there is bring our model out into the community now with our Falchus Jack classes. So when we do classes in the other towns in the county, in Clones, in Carrickmacross, in Castleplainy, we bring on the day of the class the health worker, the SICAP new arrival support worker, and our regular SICAP worker is there to make sure that we have a coordinated suite of supports available to the people who come in on the day, so they can get information about healthcare, about driving lessons, about employment, about anything else they need on the day. We're looking at 2 new pieces of work: an intercultural presentation on Irish norms. It's important that we understand the cultures we're dealing with. It's equally important that the cultures who come to us understand Irish norms. So, for example, in Carrickmacross and South Monaghan, our Roma community have a tendency to congregate on the streets. They're very visible, and sometimes they block the footpaths, and we have to explain to them how within Irish society that wouldn't be normal, and how it can be made less intimidating when people are walking down the street and they have to walk through a crowd of strangers, how to sort of deal with that challenge. We're also looking at doing a storytelling piece of work with a school in Clones. It's a pilot, because storytelling with young children from migrant communities improves their literacy, their numeracy, their language skills, and their creativity, and it also brings on language skills within the family, because the kids go home and tell the stories they learn within the family. To conclude, I just want to say we have to remind ourselves all the time of why we do this work, and the thing we sometimes overlook is the opportunities that migration brings. The pictures on the screen, they all have one thing in common. Sylvester Stallone, Sinatra, Mario Puzo that wrote The Godfather, Frank Capra who made It's a Wonderful Life, and Barbera in Hanna-Barbera that made the Scooby-Doo cartoons. They all had one thing in common. They were all first generation or second generation Sicilians, and they all made their name in America. So you go, why do Sicilians go to America? Because Sicily is a very poor country, the same way, or the same reason Irish people went to America. But if you look back in history, in the Middle Ages, Sicily was very rich. It was an island at the heart of the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean was like the internet of its day. But in 1492, a great tragedy befell. The Kingdom of Spain was united under King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, and they were Catholic monarchs, and they decreed that all Moors and all Jews would be expelled from their kingdom. Now, the governor of Sicily knew this was a bad move, because the Jewish community were money lenders, the Moorish community were merchants. He appealed to the king and the queen not to do this, but they wouldn't listen. They expelled the Moors and the Jews. The economy started to go into decline without funding, and a couple of hundred years later, Sicily was becoming a very poor place. The French owned it then. They tried to bring back a Jewish community, but they found there was a lot of anti-Semitism ingrained in the people by that stage. And the people who came from the Jewish community didn't stay long, they left. So when you have a society that's tolerant, that society has an ability to become wealthy and rich. But a tolerant society can be made intolerant very easily. And when a society becomes intolerant, it's much more difficult to turn it around and make it tolerant again. And for us who are sitting in a wealthy country, one of the wealthiest in the world, we have to look back at our own history from time to time. This is Hugh O'Neill. Hugh O'Neill was one of the wealthiest people in Ireland at the end of the 1500s. And at the end of the 1500s, the Spanish sent an armada to invade England. A number of the ships of the Spanish armada, which was scattered by a storm, were wrecked off the coast of Ireland. And Spanish soldiers were washed ashore in Derry and in Donegal and other parts of the Irish coast. The English Queen of the day, Queen Elizabeth, had decreed anyone giving shelter to these Spaniards would be declared a traitor and their lands would be forfeit to the Crown. O'Neill had Spaniards on his land in Derry. He took a herd of cattle, he went up, he fed them, he gave them shelter, he got them on ships and he got them back to Spain. O'Donnell had Spaniards in Donegal, and for other reasons he surrendered those to the British, to the English government, and they were hung. O'Neill berated O'Donnell. He said that he and his posterity might one day have to seek refuge in another country, and it would be a fitting revenge of fate for betraying these poor creatures in their only refuge. 20 years after the Armada was wrecked, O'Neill and O'Donnell were in Europe seeking refuge because their fortunes had turned. There's nothing to say that ours won't either. And we look at migrants as a challenge, and at this point in time, working in integration and that, it is challenging work, but the opportunities and the benefits for our country, if we do this successfully, can't be underestimated. And thank you very much.